Factor, the show that really goes into what exhibitions, how exhibitions work. I'm your host, Lee Ali, founder of Expo Stars Interactive. And every episode of the Expo Factor, I sit down with experts in sales, events, communication, and human behavior to uncover the strategies that help exhibitors create better experiences and better outcomes. Today, we're going to go into a different area. Normally, we speak with communication experts on that human-to-human connection, but today we're going to really get a perspective from the designers. Okay, so people who actually design the experiences and how they actually develop the concepts and experiences that drive human behavior at exhibitions. Today, I'm going to be joined by two people who I've been really good friends with for a while, and they've spent decades helping brands design more meaningful exhibition experiences. Chris Dunn is the Vice President of Sales and New Business Development at BlueHive Exhibits and a passionate advocate for building engagement through trust, strategy, and a human connection. Joining him is Dunn Esposito, who's the Executive Vice President of Strategy at BlueHive, an organizational strategist and an experiential design expert who helps solve complex challenges through intentional, customer-focused experiences. We're exploring a topic that really sits at the heart of successful exhibiting, designing experiences that drive better exhibition results. We'll be discussing intentional design, customer journeys, human behavior, and the key questions that exhibitors should be asking before they ever start designing a booth. Welcome, Chris. And welcome, Dana. Welcome to the Expo Factor.
Hey, Lee.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hey, it's been a while.
Introduction.
So the last time I spoke to you, I was a guest on your podcast, the Event Marketers Toolbox. So I just thought I'd return the favor and have you on my show.
Nice. We keep meeting like this.
Yes. As they say, we've got to stop meeting like this, otherwise people are going to talk. Which is exactly what we want. Yeah, exactly what we want them to do anyway, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So the last time we met was in person, I should say, was at Exhibitor Live in Tampa. And what I loved about your exhibition stand was it was completely different to anything I'd seen on the show floor, and you had a very creative booth with an amazing experience, incorporating almost all of the five senses. So tell me a bit more about what led to that experience, how you actually went about creating it, and what was the whole concept behind it.
Sure. So my foundation is exhibit design, right? Although I do multiple things, wear multiple hats now. Over the years, they're all different types of exhibits that we've done. Some of them are very basic, but when we're trying to really connect with a client and bang them over the head with, like, what is the one differentiating factor between yourself and your competitors? If you can attack someone's senses and create an experience, if they can have an emotion, then they're more likely to learn it and remember it, right? Be memorable.
Yeah.
So for us at Exhibitor Live, selfishly, I've always loved that show. I worked at a couple different exhibit houses, but I've always been a big fan of that show, partly because we get the chance to exhibit with our own exhibit, right? Tell our own story for once. And I have always been very inspired by, like, Mitchell Mock, and who was a friend of mine, and I was lucky enough to work on a project with him years and years ago. And also, like, at Euroshop, like, I love the exhibits where just the exhibit itself is doing a heavy lift of making a big impression and communicating a message, like just the structure itself, which is asking a lot of just a structure, right? But if you can also surprise someone and, like, provoke human curiosity, you're lifting so much weight, right? That's a huge amount of human brain space that you're taking from them, and then giving them something back. Right. So
and it's easier, right? And it is easier because the brain doesn't have to do any work.
Right, exactly. So if you're going to a show, like for us, we know who at Exhibitor Live who those that audience was for us. It's
Yeah.
mostly trade show and exhibit and brand managers at different levels of their career, and they're going there to learn. So for us, we're like, well, yeah, we want to attract people so we can tell them who we are, what we do, but humans like to talk about themselves, right?
Yeah.
And
Of course.
humans,
Yeah.
like if you give one of your friends or a coworker a picture and you all took a group picture together, the
Yeah.
human being's automatic reaction when they see that group pictures, they look for themselves in it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And just the science of human brains, like our favorite word to hear is our name. So
Yeah.
if I'm talking to
Absolutely.
you,
Yeah.
Lee, and I
Yeah.
say your name every now and then, Lee, by the time we get off the call, Lee, you're going to feel like I really cared about you,
Yeah.
right? And also if I stop and let you talk, right?
Yeah.
Because then you got to talk, it was about you,
Yeah.
right? So if you can do stuff like that with your exhibit,
Yeah.
an attendee is going to feel connected. They're going to have curiosity. They're going to feel like they were cared about. Um, and so those are the type of things we try to do. So at Exhibitor Live, we created a journey. We literally created a
Yeah.
tunnel,
Yeah.
you know? And when you deal with tunnels, it's tricky because even internally, when you present it to whether it's ourselves or to a client, it's like, oh, well, what if someone's going to feel like it's too closed off? They're not going to feel like they want to
Yeah.
go through it,
Yeah.
and there's all these other things that happen the second you have some sort of tunnel, right? But ours had some openings in it, so that was a
Yeah.
non-issue. It was also very colorful. There was lighting, there was movement, and it was more like, and it definitely was a path. There was a beginning and an end. And
Yeah.
journeys in booths can be tricky because it's a big open booth.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where do you
Yeah.
start? What if someone comes to the wrong end? So we had
Yeah.
people positioned at the beginning, and our question was really like, "Hey, do you want to take a pollinator's journey?" So it really wasn't anything about us. It was like, "Hey, would you like to take a
Yeah.
journey?"
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah.
although it was built where they could go through it on their own or like with one of us, like proctoring it, which was my preference because you're there for face-to-face journey. You're there to
Of
build a
course. Yeah.
relationship with people,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And we would take them through it. And
Yeah.
on that journey, yes, they would learn about BlueHive, but that was secondary. The
Yeah.
first things were always like, will you touch, like you need to press that button and
Yeah.
this thing's gonna happen. And then we'd walk through it and be like, okay, each flower, you're going to take some pollen, nectar from each flower because you're an abstract
Yeah.
honeybee. And that flower, that nectar, actually
Yeah.
had tips for them to keep.
Yeah.
So basically, we were saying to them, we would love to work with you. But
Yeah.
if we don't work with you now, we still want you to be super successful because maybe we'll work
Yeah.
together someday.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
even we don't work together someday, we still want the industry to be healthy and solid. So it was kind of like,
Absolutely.
oh,
Yeah.
you're giving, we're here at the show to be educated and you're giving us additional free education. It's like,
Yeah.
it's, it's the largest soft sell you can do because they're understanding that we genuinely do care, you
Yeah.
know? And so that
Yeah.
was happening repeatedly along the journey. And so it was kind of well, then they were almost like, well, what do you do? It was like, well, we did this, all of
Yeah.
this, the
Yeah.
design, the idea, the structure, the message, everything you're taking away. We did all of this. We can do this for you. But
Yeah.
but let's just keep talking about what else we can help give you for brain food to be awesome at your own job.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
here's it may be a higher end expensive way to communicate something with an RFID chip, but here's also a
Yeah.
low cost tactile way to collect data with ping pong balls.
Yeah.
So,
So yeah, I think the great thing for me was that you combined everything. So you had the journey, okay, you had the experiential part, okay, it was quite immersive as well. But I think the biggest thing I saw was control of the journey, okay, which is especially when you have a big space booth and you have people coming in from all four corners, it's very difficult for an exhibitor to actually take that control of that journey because you're being cornered. Well, you're literally being cornered from four corners, right? So
yeah.
actually having that control was really, really good to see. So moving on to my first question to you is, let's look at, what things that you've talked about all point towards intentional design, because you have the intention to actually control the journey. So define what intentional design is in the context of exhibitions, as opposed to any kind of booth design?
Yeah, that I love that you're asking that question because
Yeah.
let's just say someone has a 20 by 20 island exhibit.
Mhm.
Okay. And the designer is going to, I always laugh when people like, oh, well, the designer did this and the designer did that. Like, we just do whatever we want. Like, we're just willy nilly, like being artists everywhere. It's like, no, no, no. That's the difference between an artist and a designer.
That's what salespeople
Artists, right, right. So artists can do whatever they want.
That's right.
Designers are always solving things for other people.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be the trade show and event manager that you're working for, right? And everything about their company, their brand, their products, their message, maybe even what the CEO of the company has like a certain affinity for, the budget, the logistics. And whether it's a rental booth or a custom booth or a combination of both, you're also being very strategic, making sure it can be built, it can be taken down, it can be shipped, it can be created, it's relatively lightweight. You're taking all these things in consideration, including what someone like an account executive like Chris Dunn, if he's your salesperson, he might also have an idea that you're like, all right, I got to also, Chris has this idea, right? So we're not whatever the designer wants, right? But that 20 by 20 should be strategic. Now, there's a big difference between strategic, hitting all those things, that the functional things that are needed, the brand, look, feel, message, that can have a strategy to it. But where you're starting to pull in intentional design, that is when it's like another layer of strategy. It's when the designer is saying to the client, okay, you have 2 shows. At these 2 shows, what is the audience specifically like? Like, for instance, maybe it's a client that goes to a show where the audience is doctors and there's there's an engagement there. But that same client might send that booth to their next show where their audience is actually nurses.
Yeah.
Their interactivity and even their message might, or at least I should say, should change. And that intentional design is, especially with the experiences, taking into consideration who your specific audience is, what that demographic and what those humans, you're kind of making a generalization, right? Of what they are like, how they communicate, what they want. So like doctors, and I'm going to totally oversimplify because like I'm not giving you visuals here, but like a doctor may go to an exhibit and they may be really focused on data, right? They may also want an interactive. Again, I'm oversimplifying. Maybe there's like a little putting, right? And during the putting golf game, it's competitive. It's listing like who's got the best score. Maybe during this game, whether it's an actual putting, like hands-on tactile, or it's a digital thing, they're learning things about the product or the medication along the way. So it's not just a game. And that's really important. That's more intention. Are you just trying to get people in the booth, like just, boots on the ground, just a whole bunch of leads? Or are you trying to get specific leads? Like, how do you intentionally attract certain people? Well, to do all that, the client needs to help you know who they're trying to attract, what that audience is like for them, what you want them to specifically know about you. So a lot of times I'll say to a client, what is your one differentiating factor from your competitor? Or what's the one thing you want them to know? Yeah, they're going to have experienced all this. But if you, after a trade show, they just probably went into, they maybe only made it into 6 booths, but they probably walked by about 100. How are they going to remember you and your message versus somebody else?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's a sea of people yelling at you with their brand and all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So that same booth, when they go to that nurses show, nurses are much more gregarious. Right? They're much more sort of people focused. And as much as they might like data, that might not be their first thing that might pull them into an exhibit. It might be something a little more relational. Like oftentimes that's why nurses become nurses. They're still into the care of humans, but it's much more relational, much more personal, and like, for instance, like if you remember like the old Wii game, there was like the dance party Wii game. I remember a client had it in their exhibit. Something like that you could put in a nurse's booth, but you couldn't put in a doctor's booth. If that's the audience. Again, oversimplifying, but you get what I'm saying. So the intention has so much to do with the extra level of questions that are really starting to talk about human behavior and what certain humans are more comfortable doing or what they expect or want to absorb communication-wise.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Dana. Chris, if I can bring you in. mean, from
I'm having a great time just listening to them.
Okay, let's make you feel included, right?
Okay. She's the smart one, for sure. Just to add, Lee, if I could just kind of piggyback on what she's talking about there specifically, right? We're all as humans who have lived a lot of years, like we have. We've no doubtedly experienced a hospital visit, whether it be for a loved one or ourselves, and we can see the difference between doctors and nurses dramatically, right? And it's interesting that you use that as an example, because I spent a lot of time in the hospital with my dad over several years before he passed, and the doctors would come through and throw a bunch of jargon at you, and you'd be like, I don't know what any of this means. None of it sounds good. And he would leave, or she would leave as a doctor, and then the nurse would come in, or the PA maybe, and they would like, dude, take a deep breath. Here, I'm going to break it down in layman's terms, and I'm going to tell you what this means to you. And I think that was a great illustration of meeting people where they are and speaking their own language. And that's what we're trying to do with the exhibit as well, is like understand what motivates people. And if they are data junkies and they just want data, like, give it to them. That's great.
Yeah.
But if they're empathic people who are more about relationships, then take the opportunity to connect in those ways as well. So great illustration, Dana. And just, I think we've all experienced these types of things in our own lives. So it's always nice when you can kind of tie that experience together and weave that into the stories that we help our customers tell. Yeah.
No, it's always amazing. What I find is that how real life situations actually played out on the exhibition floor. I mean, we've all seen it. So great. My question for you, Chris, was, we're talking about intentional design, but when you're actually approaching customers, your customers as a design firm, sometimes you'll get people who don't actually know what they actually want to achieve. How do you actually deal with that kind of scenario? And how do you actually lead them into thinking about that intentional design and getting into great experiences? I know that sometimes when I get approached, or sometimes when I've done exhibitions, it's always kind of really difficult to understand, where to even start. So for you, when you're actually working with clients, what is this core starting point so that you can actually lead them down to the way that Dana just described through intentional design?
Yeah, from the starting point, we always schedule a discovery call, to start the process. And some people will come in with the list of things and say, I put everything down, and they start, listing off functional elements. We need 3 demo stations. I want a, semi-private conference room. We want a tower with a big video wall, whatever it is, right? They've got an idea. They've got an idea of what they think they want, but our goal is always to just we of course listen to that, but we also back up and say, before we worry about the functionality piece, let's talk about the goals of what you're trying to achieve. Right. So, and typically Dana and or somebody from her team, one of the other designers, is on with myself and an account manager. So there's the client facing team, and then there's the designer, right? And making sure that we're going through a proper, discovery call with proper questions, but understanding what their end goals are, because to assume that you're only there to get leads is a misconception in a lot of places, and a lot of times. There's many other reasons that we're going to shows, or people are going to shows. So helping them back up, take a breath, take a second, and understand. And we do try to send food for thought kind of questionnaire out ahead of that discovery call, and just give them a little bit of a heads up. These are some of the things that we're going to ask you about. Because if you surprise maybe a junior person who's just really more of an information gatherer, you may end up stumping them, and they might not have a lot of answers, right? So we always want to try to give people a little bit of an arsenal ahead of time, making sure that we're managing expectations of what this discovery call is going to look like, and then the type of information that we're looking to gather, right? It's not just how many demo stations, what's your budget, what are your needs, right? We always want to kind of dive in. So that's where the sales team and the design group are really kind of working, in synchronicity to try to call that information from that potential client. And just to kind of add to that, you mentioned, some people show up and they don't necessarily know what they want, which that happens a lot, and that's totally fine. They're coming in, and a lot of times they literally use the words like, "You guys are the experts. You tell me." But if we can get enough information ahead of time, or from those clients, not what the booth's supposed to look like, but what they're trying to achieve, that really kind of helps do that. On the flip side, sometimes people come in knowing exactly what they want, and sometimes we actually will create a rendering of what they say they want and show them why that's actually not the best scenario. Not to make them look like they don't know what they're talking about, but to say, listen, those are all really great ideas. We're going to actually illustrate what you've described, and we're going to kind of poke some holes in it, because as a consultative partner of yours, we're not here to just yes you. We are here to provide the best information we can, the best list of things that we are going to try to accomplish, and then have you come alongside us and design, with us through that process, and show you why maybe what you were thinking would work is actually not necessarily the best strategy.
Okay. Now, at what point do you decide that, let's say the client pushes back and says, no, I'm very adamant that I want to go with my design? Do you walk away, or do you still take the order and still make it happen? Or do you think what they're doing is, okay, it's not going to work, so where do you draw the line?
That's a great question, because at the end of the day, we are in fact in business, and if we pushed away every client that we didn't fully agree with, that can be apprehensive. I think the process of picking a creative agency to work with is you find that a real good partner will self-select into the process, right? If you as the customer are saying, these are the things that I want, and your agency's pushing back and say, here's what we recommend, those two things don't look anything alike, you're probably not going to necessarily pick that group, because you just don't jive with who they are. So there's a balance there for sure. At the end of the day, we want to do our best to assist our clients in being as successful as they can be. I would say it's very rare where people kind of draw a line and say, this is exactly what I want. I don't want to hear anything from you guys. It's usually landing somewhere in the middle. Here are some great ideas that our design group has come up with, and they kind of jump in and like, well, I like that, I don't like that. Or sometimes it's a color palette thing. Sometimes president hates purple, like, let's make sure not show any purple in there. Sometimes it's little details like that. So you usually find a happy medium somewhere along the line, and figure out the best way that you can kind of work with that client. There's no one way to do things. So we always want to be open to hear as many ideas as possible that the client is bringing forth.
And clients, they know that we're exposed to a lot of things. So even if they're not ready to do something shiny, something interactive, oftentimes we'll still show them some things, or especially if they're greener and they just haven't done any of that, we have some examples we can show them, even if it's not custom to them yet. It's like, well, you could also do something like this. And we don't push it on them. It's just more like, hey, just so you know, this is something you have access to if you want to when you're ready. And what usually happens is they're not ready yet, but they eventually become ready, because they start going to shows and they realize that those are tools that they do want to have and their competitors have. And so I think as time goes by, they're glad that we at least put that in front of them, because it's like a menu. They don't have to eat it, right? But they know it's there if they want it, and they know that we're looking out for their best interest and always trying to like move them forward, but at whatever pace they're ready. And that could be pace they're ready, meaning mentally whatever company they're working with is ready to, or even financially, like budget wise, they had never thought of that additional piece, but maybe they really like it and they're going to budget for it next year, because, or, in some way, it doesn't have to be exactly what we put in front of them, but we're always trying to bring them brain food, because we want them to be awesome.
Obviously, the more ideas that you give them, the more creative they can actually get themselves as well. So I think that's great. So let's move on to the design process then. Obviously, so Chris has gathered all the outcomes that the exhibitors actually want, and then obviously you get involved in the process. So where do you actually start with the design process? Is it looking at, I mean, if I came to you and said, I have these fantastic widgets that make beer taste better for Chris, where would you even start with the concept?
Widget.
Where would you actually start with the design process? What kind of questions would you ask? And,
Yeah.
how would you go about creating that first render and then presenting it to the client? So
Yeah.
talk me through how your brain works, because as we were talking before the episode, apparently Chris said it's full of butterflies and flowers.
Angry butterflies and flowers. So usually the designer's on that call, the info pickup discovery call with the client. So they have a chance to hear it from the client directly, which is always best case scenario, and not just see it on a piece of paper, because when you're hearing it from the client, you get to hear like the inflection of their voice and the look on their face. And that is very important when a designer is gauging sort of how they're going to solve it for a client, and because if they have, like to your point, at some point the designer's going to walk away and they're going to be at their desk by themselves and they're going to have to figure this out. So it's a combination of, I think, designers do it different. I can tell you, and for me, I don't start designing it right away on my computer. I actually sit there and I'm not a beautiful sketcher, but I'll make some little thumbnail sketches of what I'm trying to solve. Like for instance, if they say to me, well, we have a program and we have a brand new 60 by 80, but it needs to also work as a 50 by 50 and a 30 by 30. And, I'm going to draw those little squares down right away. So my brain is starting to picture that no matter what I draw for this 60 by 80, how is that going to slowly have the pieces taken away? So when they go down to the next show, they're not always building new stuff, because that means I'm asking them to spend more money, and I want to be smart with their dollars. I want to give as much as possible. So functionally, I'm looking at it as like a chessboard, right? And in the big booth, all the pieces are there, and the smaller booths, I'm removing pawns and knights and bishops and that sort of thing, right? And then I'm starting to think about, okay, what are the different audiences? What are the products? Are there different products at different shows? So I'm thinking of it functionally, but I'm also thinking about how to communicate that stuff. And that's not always with the structure. That might be with other things that work in conjunction with the structure. So for me, it's not long after I kind of put myself through this weird brain, just thinking about it a lot. Actually, I really come up with a lot of good ideas for booths to solve them when I'm at home, not trying to think about work. When something pops in my head, and I'm like, damn it, I'm trying not to think about that right now. But then I start to go into the computer and I start carving out. And again, the first thing I'll draw, if it's a program, is all the different sizes. Because again, I don't want to hand my client a problem. I don't want to give them one big booth that looks amazing in a rendering, amazing in a big booth, but when they go to set it up on show site, it's a giant pain in the ass. It's a ton of extra time and labor. It's super heavy. And guess what? When I go to break it down for other shows, it's not conducive for that, or it doesn't look as nice. It doesn't function as nice. Or internally, because it's not just like what the designer does, right? It's all of our other team members. To how CAD engineering engineers it to break down, all the way out to the warehouse, how they literally crate it so that when you get to the smaller booths, you're only taking the crates for the components that make that smaller booth. You're not sending extra crates. So that's where all the design thinking starts, but the strategy weaves its way all the way through the company into all the other departments. Because I can have an awesome idea, but if all my other departments don't do what they do, my idea means nothing. So like my idea is only as solid as even our warehouse staff and our setup staff is.
Oh, that process is amazing, because you've got, what you're doing is you're assembling a jigsaw piece, right?
Yep. And it's usually a jigsaw that's never been done before.
They've never been done before.
And that's why designers in our industry like this industry, because we tend to have a short attention span. I would never make it as an architect who's like working on the same thing for 2 years or more. Like I couldn't make the same project for 6 months. I'd be like, I've looked at this long enough. So we thrive on things being different every day. And even the speed of our industry, we thrive on the speed of our industry, but it has to be different every day. If we're solving the same problem over and over again, exhibit designers, especially, I feel like will go crazy.
Yeah.
We need
And
challenge.
at what point do you start thinking about the attendees and
Very
how
early
they
on.
interact? Yeah, very early on.
Very early
Okay.
on, because if I'm using this example of like multiple shows, a program,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to figure out how the structure breaks down, I'm also thinking
Yeah.
about, well, what is the interactive or what's the engagement, what's the message at
Yeah.
these different shows? Because, for instance, using the doctor and nurse analogy, if two of those shows have different audiences, I
Yeah.
have to do something different with the exhibit that pays attention to that human difference.
Yeah.
And it might be as simple as changing out the graphics and rearranging the property a little different.
Mhm.
It might be something as complex as the interactive from show to show is monumentally immersive and monumentally different.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of talking of attendees, obviously, there's a big thing about emotions. Okay, how you influence those emotions,
Yep.
and where do you actually start with thinking about the colors and the emotional aspect? I mean, are you thinking when you're designing how is this going to impact the attendees emotionally? Okay, especially when it comes to colors and the kind of the journey that they go through.
Yes. So, yes, or yes, and some clients don't, they're not ready for a big immersive thing yet. So we're
Mhm.
really relying heavily, especially when it comes to colors. It's not up to me, it's the brand,
Yeah,
right? So whatever
yeah,
the client has already figured out for their brand, we try to be very allegiant to that, because
yeah,
the exhibit structure is essentially a three-dimensional uh, version of that brand. It's just
yeah.
a space to have an experience that's all about
Mhm.
the brand and their message. So we can't like stray from that. In the beginning, when it's the conceptual color renderings, there's a little sort of poetic license in there because we're making fictitious graphics, but it still looks and
Mhm.
feels like them. It's not
Yeah,
until we're done revising the booth where they're like, we're going to make real graphics for this space now.
yeah,
At the
sure.
beginning, it's kind of like, don't worry about the graphics too much yet, because we're going to be changing the structure so much that to make real graphics would be a waste of your time and money.
Yeah,
We'll just do fake graphics for now.
absolutely. Chris, I mean, to what extent in the sales process do you get involved with figuring out who that target audience is and what their audience persona is, and do you get into the psychology of your clients' target audience?
Yeah, I think to an extent, it's always important to understand, who it is that we're talking to, right? And
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in a very simple, easy to understand message. Going back 30 years, of being in the industry, one of the very first things that I learned was, you know, light, color, and motion are things that attract attention. And I've got somewhere between 3 to 5 seconds, depending on the size of the booth. Maybe, if you got a large booth, and a little longer than that. But I've got a fairly short period of time in order to attract that attention. So knowing who it is that we're trying to talk to, whether it's a persona, um, and granted, most large shows, you're going to have a lot of different personas, right? You can't necessarily, like Dana was saying earlier, are we talking just to doctors? Are we talking to doctors and nurses? Are we talking about healthcare professionals in general? Are we talking about anybody who, healthcare IT professionals, even different, right?
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
So it's important to
absolutely. Yeah,
understand kind of who those attendees are going to be, and then that helps us dictate not only what the booth might look like, and function like, and all of those types of things. I think another good illustration of that is to, again, kind of going back to, like, how can we meet people where they are. And I see this certainly not so much in myself, but in my wife and my family. Coming out of COVID, if you were an introvert and going into COVID, you became an even deeper introvert because the
Mhm.
world gave you a license to not have to talk to other people.
Yeah,
And as an extrovert, I can't really wrap my head around that, but that's not the point. The point is, like, I have to respect the fact that a lot of people are uncomfortable engaging,
yeah,
certainly in large crowds, right? So how that might, you're an introverted extrovert, Dana. Um,
Exactly. only because I have to be, but I am an introvert. But yes, go ahead.
How that might show up in a design process, and what we do end up having conversations about on the front end is like, listen, let's acknowledge the fact that some people aren't going to be comfortable walking in and engaging. So what if we put a demo station that is on the aisle, and they can walk up and they can, go ahead and tap the interactive, and they can engage at their own pace. They can kind of start out on this journey, with this silent salesperson that is a fully digital interactive piece, or it's a little trigger for a video, whatever that thing might be. So I think that's a great example of how you like acknowledge the fact that there's a lot of people out there who might want to learn in different ways, whether they be a young Gen Z person or a boomer. All of these things we try to factor in as much and as many as possible, and come up with solutions that are going to work for the masses. Because just as much as if we can dial it into a very specific person, we also have to, for larger shows that are 30, 40, 50, 60,000 people who are coming, you got to acknowledge the fact that you're going to have people of all different types. So how do you build something that's not too generic but also not too specific?
Yeah, you have to make those journeys meaningful to every single person, right? Because that's where personalization comes in. So it's a fine art to make everyone feel welcome, and to make them feel that the messaging is for them. So I think you need to weave into that customer journey a bit of everything, I guess, in terms of what. Do you use any specific tools, like looking at people's disc profiles or anything like that when it comes to designing that journey? In terms of, so for example, if doctors, they may be introverts, some of them. Okay, some of them may be like very senior executive management types, and then you might have the junior doctors who are very outgoing, full of life, at the start of their career. So how do you, cater for all those different types of personalities into creating a personalized experience? Tough question.
So, well, it is, but so I can only answer for me. I can tell you that, say, I consider myself an introvert, although I have forced myself for certain things to be chatty and networky and all those things. But by nature, I am an introvert. So I use myself as a test audience often when I'm thinking about what the experience is, and I very much try to be empathetic and put myself into that specific audience's shoes. Right. And because I know that it's going to be much easier for someone like Chris Dunn, when he goes to an event, he has no problem walking in and talking to anybody, a stranger. He has no problem walking to group. Extroverts actually gain energy by being in large groups and like going to a bar and introverts are the opposite. It's going to suck energy away from us to be in those places. And we also maybe are more sensitive to, we don't want to do anything that would embarrass us. We don't want people to notice us, so we try to be in the background. So I use myself as a test because I'm the hardest audience to engage. Right. So I think if I am a doctor who is an introvert, maybe I'm serious, maybe I want information about that company I'm looking at. I'm going to stand in the aisle. I'm going to look at whatever this big, maybe it's a pharmaceutical medical device, who knows? I'm going to stand in the aisle. I'm going to look at it for a minute before I decide if I'm even going to go in there. So if I'm standing in the aisle, I'm not Chris who's just going to wander in and be like, hey, it's a party, everybody. What's up? What is going to make me, that introvert doctor, go in there for that information that I'm hoping to glean? Right? Am I provoking their curiosity? I can tell you provoking human curiosity is difficult, but what's even more difficult is causing, like, compelling human action. So if I can pique their curiosity, great. But am I piquing it enough or doing something else that's actually going to cause them to come over and engage in that exhibit? And if they're going to engage in that exhibit, are they going to be talking to a person, or are they just engaging like with that workstation, that demo that's close to the aisle? Or is there a product close to the aisle? Like what's there to let them know that it's safe for them to approach and come in? It's like the difference between going to maybe a furniture store when I was younger, which if you go to a furniture store younger, it's like going to a car lot. Someone's going to come talk to you right away. Introverts, nope. I'm out. If I see it happening to someone else, I'm not approaching. But furniture days and car lots these days, at least most of them that I've experienced, are a little more standoffish. They might go, hey, I'm over here. I'm Fred. I'm over here if you need me. And then they'll leave you alone. And like, yep, That's what I want. So I use myself because I'm
Yeah.
very difficult to engage. And a
Yeah.
client who knows their audiences, even if they're different at their program,
Mhm.
a client who knows what their differentiating factor is, or knows specific um, types of professionals they want to engage, or if they know, like, I'll even say to a client, how will you gauge after the show, you and whoever else you need to please internally, how will you
Yeah.
guys gauge that this going to the show was worth it, spending those dollars is not cheap? How will
Yeah.
you guys gauge it was successful? I need to know
Yeah.
that ahead of time, because I
Yeah.
can't lay that path to success. I can't design it,
Mhm.
build it, unless I
Yeah.
know what the goal is we're trying to achieve. So if I know all those challenges, it's actually easier for me. Like the
Yeah.
more rules they give me, the easier,
Yeah.
because I'm getting very specific. Like
Okay.
I co-chair a mentorship program with a friend of mine from another exhibit company in the Midwest, and we mentor future exhibit and experiential designers. And one of the things we explain to them is it's actually easier to come up and solve the problem of a specific audience at a specific time and with a specific product and a specific message than it is to create some sort of like a pop-up event in a public space.
Yeah.
Because in a public space, typically your audience is everybody,
Mhm.
everybody of every
Uh,
gender, of every age, of every interest, and maybe even multiple languages.
yeah.
That's going to be really hard.
Absolutely. Of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the more rules you give me, the harder
Yeah.
the puzzle to solve, the better puzzle and actually more successful.
Fantastic. Let's look at the journey then. Are there any critical points that you look at in the customer journey that actually will make a difference? So obviously you mentioned the curiosity part. That is
Mhm.
obviously very critical. And
Yep.
then further down the journey, what are the key moments where you're looking to change the attendee's mind or help them take the next step?
A few things I always remember is, like KISS, keep it simple, stupid,
Yeah.
right? Make the sure your message is simple because they're more
Yeah.
likely to remember it.
Yeah.
Also, who's the attendee, what do they like, so the message can be geared towards that. Also, humans are still just we're giant kids,
Yeah.
right? So if you can teach them something by using curiosity and play, and by play doesn't need to be silly,
Yeah.
because a lot of professionals on a trade show floor don't want to do something silly. That being
Yeah.
said, if you go to like Black Hat or a show like that where you're like very techie people, they might be more interested in doing almost like a giant um, video game. Like
Yeah.
that's a different kind of
Yeah.
play. So I don't mean play in a literal sense. I mean for them to absorb the information is play and interesting,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they're going to be more likely to want to be involved in it, and while they're involved, they're more likely to like be present and stay in
Mhm.
it,
Yeah.
especially if you can surprise them along the way.
Yeah.
And one thing that I kind of beat over my own head over and over again is there's so much technology out in the world. I mean, we literally walk around with a computer in our pocket.
Yeah.
That as
Yeah.
much as I adore it, I'm a nerd, right?
Yeah.
um, there's missing things like pressing of a button. And when we're
Yeah.
little, like pressing of a button, it's even very common to make people have worry stones. I like touching things that are tactile.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
missing from our human experience more now than ever before.
Yeah.
So yes,
I
you might
agree.
still
Yeah.
have some sort of technology, but can they touch something? Not just the screen. You're already
Yeah.
touching a screen on your phone all the
Yeah.
time. Like that's
Yeah.
not a novelty anymore,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Of
Are they
course. Yeah.
touching something? Is there a haptic? Like, does it click? Is there a bong? Like, what is
Yeah.
the thing?
Yeah.
So I would say involve more than one human sense. Sight and sound are the easy lifts
Oh
most of
gosh.
the
Yeah.
time. But what else? Is there a haptic? Is there a vibration? Are they
Yeah.
touching something themselves with their hand? They should be. They should be touching something, because every additional sense that you can get their brain to fire, those are additional neurons in their brains that are
Yeah.
activating. And the
Yeah.
more senses that you activate, the more likely they are to remember it. And memory and learning are connected, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the easiest way to explain this to someone is to say, think of a smell that every time you smell it reminds you of something. And like for me, when I go outside, if there's a structure fire, if there's like a building on fire, it reminds me of when I was 5 years old and my house burnt down. And it wasn't, no one got hurt. It wasn't hugely traumatic. A house burnt down, we rebuilt it. It's fine.
Yeah.
But structure fires are different than a campfire smell.
Yeah.
And when I smell that smell, I think of when my house burned down. When I smell hay, I remember the barn when we used to have horses when I was little. Like when I smell crayons, I remember being little, like smells. So
Yeah.
I can do the same thing with taste. That is why at Christmas or holidays, certain dishes that we had when we were growing up are so family recipes are so immensely powerful. They
Mhm.
fire so many neurons in your brain. It's the
Yeah.
sense of smell, it's the sense of taste, it's texture, it's touching.
Yeah.
It's also like emitting, pulling your feelings of emotions in. If you can make a
Yeah.
client feel emotion, they're
Yeah.
remembering something.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
whether it was
absolutely. Yeah.
happiness, surprise, curiosity, or I can tell you right now, if they had a bad experience or they did something, if something happened where they were unhappy or felt
Yeah.
slighted or something, they're definitely going to remember you, but for all the
Yeah.
wrong reasons.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. If I could add, to that customer journey question, and just to paint the picture for the folks who didn't see our booth, which would be most of the folks out there, obviously, you worked your way through the tunnel. There were several stops. One of the last stops was kind of this interactive piece where you were kind of picking a little statuesque piece and placing it on a reader, and you're getting a message. But when we came out of there, and again, all of these stops were very purposely designed by our group, led by Dana. The last thing that we did with the client before they walked away was to create a little kind of memory piece that they actually built, and this was kind of a kaleidoscope type of a thing. So we had little
Yeah.
stones, and little sea glass and things that you put in that were translucent, and you'd literally build this thing that you could take with you. So I think that's an important thing too. As you were asking, Lee, is like, what is that customer journey? How do you map it out? There are definitive kind of stops along the way, and I think the way that you end the journey is really important because that's the last memory that they're going to have of you. What does
Yeah.
that experience feel like? So they're not just coming in for a quick chat and walking out with like a branded piece of
Yeah.
lip balm. It has a place in the market, and that's sometimes fine. But when you put together something that's really curated, that they walk away and they are touching something tactilely, and they're walking away like just with all these great memories and things that they've learned in their head, like you're really, I think, burning your brand impression upon them, and that's a great way to kind of cap that journey off.
And it's personal, isn't it? So I think,
Yeah.
as I said at the beginning, you're adding those personal touches and you're making them the hero of the journey, right? Because
mhm.
again, if you go into storytelling, and if you put the attendee in the middle of that story, then again, the memory neurons and everything else, when you're doing the follow-up, they're still going to be there. You're going to be memorable. And when you call them, hopefully in a couple of weeks, you can still talk about that experience. Okay, so get them to relive it as well. So that's great. In terms of last couple of questions, I mean, we could talk about this all week. It's such a fascinating subject. So let's say you don't have a space like a 20 by 20 or let's say you just have a 10 by 10 or a small tabletop or something like that. How can exhibitors can use small spaces to again to create that journey and make it personalized and get that kind of experience that the bigger budgets can?
Yeah, well, I have a good example. Last year at HCEA, it's a healthcare convention, healthcare marketers convention, and
Sure.
we were there. And they don't do like a booth hall. They do around their main ballroom. You can
Yeah.
sponsor a table, and it's
Yeah.
just a table. It is not a wall. There is no backdrop. Um, it is a table. So we did what we would normally do if we were had like a 10 by 10. We got a beautiful table drape that was custom
Yeah.
branded, right? So it very much looked like us. Like,
Yeah.
so how can you sort of bang people over the head of who you are, what you do with your brand and capabilities, like start building a relationship on just a table? So
Yeah.
what we had is the table with two chairs. And we, again, right away said, well, who are we talking to?
Yeah.
Like, what are they like? And what do we want them to know about us?
Yeah.
And because it was healthcare marketers, we knew that a lot of them are dealing with pharmaceutical medical device, so they're servicing the health of people. right? The show itself was down in Miami. It was kind of right on the ocean. And so we said, you know what? Let's tie it all together. So our message is strong. Have it all make sense. Like make a theme, but make the theme intentional, purposeful, strategic. So we had a beautiful table drape, and what we did was we had a monitor facing out, and on the monitor was a little ocean scene. It was a little digital interactive that we had created and scripted, and it said right on it something like help donate to the ocean cleanup, because we're right
Right.
on the ocean. So
Sure.
basically they would come up and be like, what is this? And we're like, well, if you play this like 10-second game, you, we will, on your behalf, because you came here, for however many people, we're going to donate a dollar amount towards the ocean conservatory cleanup, who literally cleans plastic and other refuse out of the oceans and lakes and rivers. And of course they love that, because part of that, when we're talking to them, is we say we also understand that, you know, with all the pollution, that microplastics, you know, with like X amount, I forget what it was like 70% of autopsies have shown that microplastics are starting to cross the, or nanoplastics are starting to cross the blood-brain barrier. So we did a bunch of research ahead of time so that our message made sense. And as we're telling these people, they're shaking their heads, because some of these are like neuroscience, neurodoctors, you know, neurologists and things. They're like, yes, that is true. And we're like, yes. So if you play this game for 10 seconds, which you touch the screen, and anytime you see a piece of trash floating with these kind of like very cute looking cartoon fish, but not silly fish, you touch the trash disappears, and the water slowly gets clearer and clearer. And when they were done, they would write their name, you know, in contact on a piece of paper. We had a clipboard, and we're like, thank you so much for playing the game. But because you played the game, I had this big piece of driftwood on the table, which they could see too, and all these little bracelets hanging on it, both some masculine, some feminine, some neutral, whatever, but they're all made out of sea glass.
Right.
And so we're like, it tied into the theme. Like, thank you for playing. Would you like to take one of these sea glass bracelets with you? And those colors of the glass bracelets all made sense with our brand, like blues and greens and whites and cream. And they loved it. We had people going, hold on, let me get the rest of my team so we can all play it. Because
Right.
they knew
Fantastic.
that people played it. So that's just a table. So if you think about all the things, it becomes a laundry list of what you want to execute and achieve, and the message, and to who.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great example. It just goes to show that you don't need, you know, lots and lots of space to create experiences. Chris, you were going to say?
I was going to add. So I'm kind of watching the chat here, and Jim Panagas, who is a friend of ours and a participant of our, who was on our show as well a number of months ago, has been kind of banging the drum on engagement and use of video, and specifically just kind of pointing out that he hasn't found tabletop booths to be all that effective. And I don't disagree with you, Jim, because most people do not take the time to do what Dana described, right? So that's the difference of being intentional and just saying, oh, we have a table throw in a banner stand or something in the marketing closet, and regardless of the event that we're going to, we're just going to take the stuff out and send it there. And Jim from the sales department will roll in, and he'll sit at the table and talk to people. Maybe that's good enough sometimes, but if you're looking to kind of move the needle, it really needs to be something that you think about a lot more deeply. So, like what Dana was talking about, it wasn't an enormous spend, but it took the same amount of thought as designing something much more grandiose, because you had to kind of think through all those pieces. But the impact that it made was dramatic. And also, we were not at a giant show where the big players were in huge island spaces, and we were relegated to this little table. Everybody was on an even playing field. Everybody who wanted to quote unquote exhibit, the biggest they could do is a table, right? So when you're in those scenarios and you don't have the benefit of going bigger and more, bright and shiny, you're just relegated to the same space as everybody else. You got to be more creative, and you got to kind of think about it and tie it into the entire theme of putting that story together. And I think that's one of the things that Dana and her team do so well is create a story that makes sense from start to finish. There's not, a piece of technology in the booth for the sake of technology's sake. There's a piece of technology in the booth that is fully tied into the message, the story, and that entire journey that makes so much sense when you put it all together. And that's, I think people walk out of a well-crafted booth that contains those type of storytelling elements feeling very different than they do if they just walk in somewhere where it's just structure, it's architecture. It might be pretty, it might be well put together, but it's going to be a very different feeling leaving a space that's it's the difference between a full experience versus just visiting a space.
Yeah,
and don't get me wrong, I adore a gorgeous looking structure, a gorgeous looking exhibit. I'm a three-dimensional brain. Like, that's where my brain lives. Like, I'm not a graphic designer. I walk in a house and I'm like, oh, their couch doesn't belong there. I don't tell them that, but like, that's where my brain lives, right? So I'm not shortchanging the structure at all. I'm just saying, whether it's a tier 1 show versus a tier 3 show, or you just having a more complex program, like, clients who take advantage of the experience and being very specific with their audience, they're just amplifying what that exhibit environment is bringing to their audience.
Fantastic. Where do you see the future going with exhibit design? Now, one thing that we've not mentioned in the last hour or so is that magic two-letter word, or I'm not going to say it. But where do you see the future of exhibit design or experiences on the show floor? Is it going to be more tech, or are we still going to be using human to human?
So I'm not afraid to say those letters. So AI. So AI is a tool that everyone's already using. Even if you just do Google search, technically there's AI built in that. So we're all using. So even people don't think they are using it, right?
Of course.
I think that it's going to continue to get more and more intelligent and specific. For me, I believe, and I could be wrong, but I believe it's a tool like any of the other tools that have come along when it comes to what I do for work, that scare us in the beginning, but it's still going to be just a tool in our toolbox. And design-wise, like from design side, we already get sometimes, like, from the client, like, hey, I put what I wanted into AI and they designed me this booth and I really like it. And look, like, it is really cool looking. It is probably $2 bajillion and there's nothing holding anything up, and the drayage and the rigging. So maybe someday that will all be sorted out. Right now, I'm not worried about it. But yeah, if they're inspired by something, we'll totally take that AI idea as inspiration, but then we're going to put all this other reality into it, like real reality, and also the dollars, and asking them all those other questions about those audiences and their program. And so there's still a lot of humanness to the design production side. Now, on the attendee side, am I worried about trade shows going away? Actually, I feel the opposite, because if AI is going to get better and better, that means you could see a video of me that I was never in, saying things that I never said. So how am I going to know? Like, humans want to do business with other humans that they trust. How are you ever going to trust me if I'm saying things to you on my website, or, it's too much gray area for fictitious bullshit. And humans can't, there's an allotment for that in business. Money is too important to keep businesses safe. So I actually feel like the face-to-face of trade shows and events are going to be even more important, because I can be assured that it's really you, Lee, when I'm talking to you. And we're like, this was great. Let's also grab coffee, because I want to talk to you about that more. And then when I fly home, I'm going to be like, I want to do business with Lee because we get each other. We have similar goals. I know he's going to protect my company.
Fantastic. Chris, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, earlier you asked a question about how deep do we dive into personas, and how what kind of tools do we use for that? And the first thing that came to mind is, like, AI research has made things like that ever more easy than they used to be, right? You used to have to be able to kind of dive into specific specific things that were created, and now I can literally go to my ChatGPT and say, here's the show I'm going to, here are the type of people who are going to be there, help me understand what I need to do for a message, and who these people are and what are their personas. So I feel like it's a tool to not be afraid of. It's a tool to just kind of utilize to the best of our ability. As somebody who uses LinkedIn a lot, you see a lot of conversation about it, and you see a lot of people using AI to either make their posts or do their comments. And I don't want like any part of that. It's just that AI stuff. I want true human authenticity when in my communication, but at the same time, to turn our backs on the technology that exists and our ability to kind of use it to fast track our research and do other things that are, that might take humans a long time to do. Like this computer thing can whip this stuff out in no time flat. Like it's crazy to not at least
it's crazy.
Benefits of it. So you got to find the happy medium. And I'll just lean into what Dana had just said with regards to, when the internet kind of first got its, get the steam going back in the early, late 1990s or early 2000s, and the idea of trade shows going away because you don't need them anymore because everything can just be virtual like this. Well, we proved, time and time again that humans are social by nature, and we need to be around people, right? So again, I think that the technology and the amount of digital interaction that we have is driving us to a point where we are specifically looking for face-to-face engagements. And we're seeing, I'd say, an uptick in 2026 in exhibits and events because people are tired of everything digital all the time, right? There's a time and a place for it, but we have to set aside intentional time to connect human to human and make sure we can do that. And certainly exhibitions and conferences and, events in general check the box on that. So I see, I'm doubling down on the fact that I think that area is certainly going to continue to grow.
Absolutely. I 100% agree with you there. So my final question to you both is, what is the most important question an exhibitor should be asking before they start the design process? Dana?
I have a hard time narrowing that down to one. I'm gonna give you two.
There we go.
Okay.
I'm gonna say what do they want to make sure the attendee learned after going through their exhibit?
Right.
Two, what is their budget?
Okay.
Because I can solve that for them, whether their budget is small or whether their budget is big. But I don't want to put something in front of them that is super expensive and an awesome idea if they can't afford it because I failed them. I need to know what their budget is, even if their budget sucks, because I can still come up with an idea, but I need to be successful for them. I feel like sometimes they're afraid to tell you the budget. Like they don't want to limit you. I'm like, you're not limiting me. I want to achieve I want to make all your wishes and dreams come true. Tell me your number. I'll try to do it within the number.
Yeah. Absolutely. Great advice. Chris, you have 1.5 questions.
When I started with BlueHive, one of my coworkers, Jack Halley, who I consider a mentor, had a great question that he liked to ask his potential clients ahead of time. And the scenario was this. You're flying home on the plane, you Mr. or Mrs. Exhibit Manager, right? Because that's primarily who we're dealing with. You're flying home on the plane and the CFO or the CEO is sitting next to you. And he turns to you and he says, that was the best show that we've ever done. The question is, what was the answer to his question, or why did he say that ultimately? Right? Because that gets you to the point where you can have all these wonderful conversations, but at the end of the day, what's the goal, right? What's the goal that we can hit? And our goal here at BlueHive is to make our clients look like rock stars. Most of them are already, but they might need a little bit of help, right? Getting the recognition for putting together the best exhibit experience that they've ever created. So if you can kind of cut to the chase and understand what that end goal is, what's gonna light the fire of the CEO or the CFO, the guys who are writing the big checks at the end of the day, then we know we can help our client accomplish that goal. So that's what I would say is probably one of the most important things that we look for.
Great advice. Thank you, Chris. Okay, sadly, we're out of time. So like I said, I could have talked to you all week about the subject, because it's not something that we talk about regularly, but it's been fascinating to get into the mindsets of an exhibit builder and designer to really understand what the design process looks like. So thank you again for all your fantastic answers. So where can we find you, Dana and Chris? Where can our audience get in touch with you? Obviously, both of you are on LinkedIn, but where's the best place? How they can get a hold of you?
Yep, LinkedIn for me.
LinkedIn, yeah.
I would say the same. I'm
Yeah.
fairly active on the platform. Some would say
Yeah.
spend too much time there, but that's how you and I met, Lee. So, I mean,
Of course, yeah.
good things come from starting relationships in the digital world and then bringing them to the physical world.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's been great. I think we've known each other for a long time now, and we always bump into each other at various industry exhibitions as well. And brilliant. So thank you very much, Dana and Chris. Enjoy the rest of the World Cup. And I certainly will be. I'm off to watch England next. Right now, actually, I'm missing the first 5 minutes. So thank you.
Got to end this show.
Thank you so much. It's been absolutely great. And I'll see you on the show floor somewhere again very soon.
It's our pleasure. Thank you so much for having us, Lee. This has been
Thanks,
a great
Lee.
conversation.